And you can understand the concern of villagers in that area as how this is being handled by the government. It's an important summit, this, for Rishi Sunak and Macron, to try and come up with some solutions that could help alleviate what is happening at the moment.
You can completely understand why people would be concerned about something like that. And that's why the Prime Minister has made it, stopping the small boats, one of his top priorities. The problem is that the illegal migration bill that has been announced this week would actually make problems like that potentially worse, because, of course, what it says is after 28 days, the decision will have been made. But, of course, it won't have been if you look at the record of this government in the speed at which they're dealing with asylum claims. And, of course, at the moment, there are no plans from the government about where people are going to be detained for that period of time. So, sadly, I think we're going to be seeing more asylum seekers being placed into hotels. Not ideal for them in any way, and not ideal for local people either. So, yes, there is a lot that Rishi Sunak has to achieve in Paris. I mean, one of the things, of course, he might ask President Macron is, how come in France you have twice as many asylum seekers and it takes you half as long to decide whether or not they've got a legitimate claim or not? That's at the heart of this problem. The government is being incompetent.
But I suppose, yeah. So everybody agrees that the processing is too slow. What Rishi Sunak has done, either rightly or wrongly, depending on your viewpoint, is to say, I want to be able to send the boats back to France, and I want France to take more responsibility, to work with us more, to stop the boats coming in the first place. If you look at the papers, various figures are quoted about what we might commit ourselves to paying France. We're already committing big chunks of check. The Times says 200 million over the course of 3 years. A small amount compared with the money paid to keep people here, but it's
or to try to send them to Rwanda.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, they're all big numbers, aren't they? Is he going to want to play ball, Emmanuel Macron?
Well, I think the relationship between Britain and France has improved over the last few months. It couldn't really have got worse after Liz Truss's comments. I think that the reaction of the people in your film there is, I mean, I don't agree with you that sort of it's understandable in some ways, but it is if you have a Home Secretary that uses extremist rhetoric in speeches in the House of Commons and in her public statements, which instills fear in people, then don't be surprised that you get reactions like that. But, I mean, would people be so concerned if it was 250 people in Kegworth coming from Newcastle or Edinburgh? No, of course they wouldn't. So what do they think these people are? They are being led to believe that these people are there to harm them in some way. And when you use these terms like asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, and worse, that Suella Braverman has been using, then don't be surprised if people get a bit concerned. The overwhelming majority of people who come to this country are coming here for the best of reasons. They come here because they see Britain as a safe haven. They see opportunities to work. They see opportunities to improve their lives. If we were in their situation, we would all be making the same decision. And that's where, I mean, I suspect everybody you interviewed in that film, if they sat down in the hotel reception with individual asylum seekers and actually heard them out as to why they're there.
No, I'm sure you're right.
It would be very
that
different.
Particular place, I think there have been some allegations of things that have been concerning, which is all part of a process that we probably can't go into. But in principle, I'm sure you're right. When it comes to one-to-one, it's the massness of it that people fear.
Yeah, and
now, look, just in terms of what of the politics of it, though, for both of you, you know, Public First have conducted a poll, and they talked to people who voted Conservative in 2019 and wanted to find out what their big concerns were. And it's a fairly sizable poll as polls go as well. And it's now the second biggest concern for people after the cost of living crisis, which we know is huge for everybody. Stopping the boats is the second biggest concern. And their reasoning that was given, according to this poll, is because of the strain on public services. They're seeing numbers coming in,
and we heard
for whatever
the woman
reason,
at the end of BT, didn't we?
whatever
At the end
reason,
of the film said
as
exactly
straining the NHS, straining schools, filling up classes, putting a strain on it. That is what what people are perceiving?
Well, first of all, I agree with Ian about the fact that some of that will be because of the language that our Home Secretary has used about the nature of people that are coming and the numbers of people that are coming. The reality is...
It's 100 million, Jackie, apparently.
Well,
exactly. Who knew?
When you use language like that, it's not surprising that people feel fearful. It's utter nonsense. In actual fact, of course,
Jackie, the Prime Minister stood up and said that, and he said that's come from the UN. Well, no, questions like, where's that come from? Where's the 100 million come from? Because they're standing up and they're saying it.
I've no idea.
She's making out that they all want to come here, which is rubbish.
The reality of the thing... Yeah, there are a lot of people, because of global uncertainties, who are moving around as migrants and becoming refugees.
But the big proportion of them stay as close to where their problems are.
Most of them stay in the countries neighbouring the countries that they come from. Many more of them stay in almost every other country in Europe as a proportion than come to the UK.
Still,
but that doesn't mean it isn't an issue.
Of people, yes, quite. People paying money to traffickers, to people, taking their money, taking their life savings, those people getting on boats, risking their lives and those of their families. Nobody wants that, does it? So in that sense, Rishi Sunak's Stop the Boat slogan that I think you said the other day we're going to see on every podium everywhere for weeks and months to come.
Which comes from Australia, by the way. And it's come from Isaac Levido, the Tory election campaign manager, because it worked in Australian elections, so they think it'll work here.
Going and having a conversation with Macron and trying to work out a reasonable way to deal with it doesn't seem like a stupid idea.
No, it's exactly the right thing to do. But Ian's identified what the problem is with the government's approach this week. It's all about the slogan you put on a lectern and the headline you get in a newspaper. It's not about solving the real problems. That takes hard work. It takes detailed and careful diplomacy with the French. It takes careful law enforcement work to catch the people who are responsible for making money out of these poor souls in the first place. And it takes good administration in the Home Office to get the claims dealt with.
So, Jackie, with that in mind, do you have more hope that we have the potential within the government now to be able to do all those things? Or are you less hopeful that we're going to come to some conclusions which actually might?
Well, you've got a game of two halves. You know, I've got more confidence in Rishi Sunak. I think Ian's right that he's actually trying to find some practical ways through this and to deal with the French. I've got a lot less faith in Suella Braverman, who I think is more interested in deciding how to get a headline and who to blame than she is in solving a problem.
And what do you do when you're in desperate political times? You resort to talking about immigration. 2005, the election that I stood in, do you remember that slogan, "Are you thinking what we're thinking?" It's not racist to talk about immigration, they had on the posters, which I banned from the constituency I was standing. In fact, a lot of good it did me, but anyway. But, I mean, it's not a good idea to have the word racist and conservative on the same poster, I would have thought. And that's what's happening here. Remember Zach Goldsmith's campaign for London Mayor, which resorted to these kind of tactics. It's an absolute disgrace.
I mean, but they will have half an eye on an election, and they'll have half an eye, or not even half an eye, bigger than a half an eye, maybe both eyes, Ian, the Conservatives, on the lead that Labour have at the moment, and the fact that they are, Conservatives, looking incredibly vulnerable.
Well, if you think your only way of winning an election is to resort to talking about immigration in the way that they are, that shows how desperate you are. And yes, there may well be people who react favourably to that. Are those the kind of votes that the Conservatives really want? Because I'll tell you what, in the blue wall seats in the south, they're going to lose support.
The other thing is, people aren't silly. They want to see results in the end. When they go to cast their votes, they're going to want to know that the problem has been solved, not just the problem's been identified and somebody's been blamed.
Well, he said, give me a year, hasn't he? What he's now said is, give me 2 years, at least for the HS2. Hasn't he? Yeah, putting it potentially beyond the next election. And, you know, this will matter hugely for many, many people. And so you could politically say getting everybody to talk about immigration and not something like this or the cost of living is effective.
And that announcement was put out at 5 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. No common statement, just put out there. And I mean, a lot of MPs are furious about that.
I thought what was interesting about your podcast this week when you had David Davis on, was saying that he was impressed with what Rishi Sunak has managed to do with Northern Ireland. And he likes to think that actually, is this the start of people understanding that Rishi Sunak could be somebody that could wrestle back the reputation of the Tories, Jackie? And I think that's something that, if he can make something happen here today in France, is another step towards that, potentially.
Well, anything's better than the last two prime ministers that we've had, but at least he seems to be serious about wanting, for example, not to shout from the White Cliffs of Dover abuse at France, but actually to get over there to try and
he's doing it
solve
against Keir
problems.
Starmer instead. At PMQs this week, he accused Keir Starmer of being on the side of the people traffickers. I mean, what an utterly disgraceful thing to say. You can be opposing a politician, but not use language like that. He should leave that to his Home Secretary and rise above it.
It's interesting, isn't it? We're going to talk about these stories in a moment. We're going to take a break and talk about it. But if you just look at the front page of the Times, you've got Gary Lineker as the big photograph connected to the immigration row. You've got France to be paid £200 million to stop the boats. HS2 is there. And then the stories that sort of disappear at the bottom. The Shell boss has got £10 million for leaving. Off the back of profits related to energy. Cancer waste, and now people wait almost half for new cancer patients are waiting longer than 2 months for life-saving treatment. Childcare problems. You know, everything is disappearing that people will probably care more about behind this row.